Let's begin this video with a very quick comparison between the Zionist ideology of Bernie Sanders and that of Ethan Klein, which will make clear to anyone who actually cares about politics rather than simple fandom that these two are not very different at all, and that it makes absolutely no sense to be virulently against Ethan Klein's views, yet to sit down and have a nice chat with Bernie Sanders as if he is your friend. Have affirmed that Israel has a right to exist. Check for both. Say that Israel has a right to defend itself. Affirm for both. Denounce any and all resistance against Israel, including even things like anti-genocide blockades. Affirm for both. Against boycotts and sanctions against Israel. Affirm for both. Consider the foundation of Israel to have been justified and a triumph of the Jewish people. Yep to both. Consider October 7th to have been a terrible, inexplicable tragedy in which 1,300 totally innocent Israelis were murdered. Affirm for both. Call the Gaza genocide a genocide. No for Bernie Sanders, he calls it a war. Occasionally yes for Ethan Klein, as he strategically calls it a genocide or a war, depending on if his wife is around. For a two-state solution to maintain Zionist ethno-nationalism. Affirm for both. Voluntarily chose to take advantage of the accident of their birth to move to Israel for a time and gain immense privileges at the expense of Palestinians. Affirm for both. Happy to denounce Netanyahu and the government, yet will never ever denounce the Zionist project or Israel and its ethno-nationalist nature at all. Affirm for both. Is an actual state agent with actual real power and influence, rather than just a propagandist on YouTube who's largely laughed at and ignored. Yep for Sanders, not so much for Ethan Klein. If anything, Ethan Klein's views on Israel are slightly less abhorrent than those of Bernie Sanders, but he lacks all of the power and influence that Sanders has. To sit down with one of these people while you denounce the other as a liberal Zionist genocide propagandist is totally nonsensical, and it can only come from a position where the actual issues are far less important to you than personal grudges, or your parasocial attachment to an internet streamer who does that. All of this is objectively true, and if you're offended, it doesn't really matter anyway, because for you this is all entertainment, and it's not like you were going to do anything in the first place. Anyway, now let's talk about Hassan Piker talking to Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He just can't help himself, can he? He just has to keep his proximity to power and influence. He has to keep his mainstream influence no matter what. He's addicted to it. This came, by the way, a week after Bernie Sanders voted on a Senate resolution to greenlight the Israeli genocide of Gaza. Celebrated on Lindsey Graham's official website, Senate unanimously approves resolution to affirm Hamas cannot retain control of Gaza. The point of this resolution is to give Israel and the US a reason to continue the genocide for as long as they want or need to. Obviously, because they're never going to destroy Hamas, and that's not actually the goal, but saying that they're doing so gives them a perpetual excuse, because they can just say Hamas hasn't been eliminated yet, so we need to continue. That's the point of this. And it was unanimous, obviously meaning that Bernie, being a senator, voted yes on it. He cannot even bring himself to say to do like a symbolic no, so that they can't say that it's unanimous. He has to vote for it, regardless of how many token tweets he makes or obviously like dumb motions he introduces to the Senate himself, like for a partial arms embargo on Israel or whatever the fuck. At the end of the day, he rubber stamps it all, and this is because he's not autonomous. Bernie Sanders is not a guy who's on his own. He's a part of the Democratic Party. He's a part of the Democratic bloc. He serves a purpose in a political machine. Same with AOC. The point of these guys is to give you the impression that there are people in the two-party system who are your voice, who are your representation, who are already doing what needs to be done on your behalf, so you don't need to do more. All you need to do is fundraise for them and donate to them. You think that they are against the mainstream of the Democratic Party, but they're not. They are a part and parcel of it. They're a really extremely important part of it as well, because they are there to ensure that you do not go against it, that you do not do things that would actually be inconvenient for it, that you are lulled into a false sense of security and complacency, and you do not go against their dictates. And if anything, you end up siding with them and participating in their apparatus. I know that Hassan Piker fans love to say that he does this shit because he's trying to pull people to the left, he's part of a pipeline or whatever. That's just so naive. You think the Democratic Party that these people are aligned with / a part of don't think about this? The actual reason why they talk to people like Hassan
is because he's part of a pipeline to them. That's why. You think you're outsmarting like the Democratic Party? You think you are like weaseling your way in there and like, ha 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 ha, I'm going to pull their voters further left. I'm going to get one up over them. These are the most like cynical, competent, genocidal imperialists in the world, most well-organized, most well-funded, and you think that you're the one who, by talking to them, is going to pull people to your side rather than them pulling your people to theirs? You're not. It's the exact opposite. They're pulling your audience to them. Then we need to ask the question of whether your audience is really truly more radical than them in the first place, which is up in the air at this point. But ultimately, what you're doing here is you're being played like a fiddle. I mean, I'm giving him the grace of assuming that what he says about his goals is true, which, given his actions, I do not believe is so. I think he just likes he likes the mainstream. He doesn't really want to fight against the mainstream. He wants to be a part of it. It gets him more fame. It gets him more wealth. It gets him more recognition. I don't think he's genuine. He genuinely is doing this as part of a strategy to like try to bring people to his side. But even if he was, he would be losing out here. Ultimately, by talking to these guys and giving them complete softball interviews and chats where he never actually questions anything about them, he never pushes them, especially does not push them, on anything regarding they and the Democratic Party's overall support of genocide and imperialism, which, yes, they do support 100%, and they are a key part of the apparatus of funneling energy away from opposing those things in any sort of effective way, of getting you complacent and not taking action. The effect of talking to them is getting people to be complacent and to not take action. And you're being played like a fiddle because that's precisely why they are talking to you. That's precisely why you get featured in the mainstream media. That's precisely why there's NBC profiles of you. Because ultimately you're recognized not as a pipeline to the far left, you're recognized as a pipeline to them. And as long as you keep letting them play you like a fiddle, you're going to keep being that. Though again, I'm just giving you the good grace of assuming that your stated motivations are really your stated motivations. I don't see how that can at all be the case. I think Hassan is just intoxicated by the mainstream fame, the proximity to power, the proximity to celebrity, and ultimately that's what he's motivated by here. If he challenged them, if he said like, Bernie, but you voted a week ago on basically what is a green light resolution to the genocide in Gaza, and because of your green light to this resolution, now the Republicans are saying, fucking AIPAC is talking about how this was unanimous, and it shows how America is united in destroying Hamas, which is a justification for continuing genocide. Bernie, why'd you do that? He could have asked that question, right? But if he asked that question, he'd never be invited back, and he knows that. So he's not going to ask it. And that's the problem. He has an opportunity to challenge the people. He has an opportunity to make a real show of it, to really put them on the spot in a way that they could not get out of because it's live. It would come at a cost to him, sure, but it would be way more effective than doing what is essentially letting them play you like a fucking fiddle and funnel your own audience into supporting what they support, which is ironically against what you claim to be for. But he doesn't do it because maintaining this access to power, to celebrity, the mainstream celebrity that he has is more important in the end. It's not being charitable. It's not, I'm regulating my rhetoric intentionally to try and get to these people. No, because you're not regulating your rhetoric. You're not being charitable. You're just being wrong. You're being wrong. And you're allowing them to launder their own wrong politics without you challenging it. You're not strategically being wrong. It's ridiculous. Like, no, I regulate my rhetoric to appeal more to liberals by saying things that are wrong. No, you don't. All you do by doing that is just, you're wrong. You spread wrong ideas. You spread wrong solutions. You spread wrong diagnosis of what the problem is. No one gets to the position that Hassan Piker is in unless you are seen as useful by those who are way more powerful and way more influential than you are. Clearly, the Democratic Party sees Hassan as someone they can manipulate and exploit, hence why he's being allowed to sit down with, regardless of Sanders saying that he's an independent, he's a Democrat, and AOC. This would never, ever happen otherwise. He can realize that, but I don't think it's that he doesn't realize that. I think he has other motivations for doing this sort of thing. He went there to legitimize that tour against oligarchy, which is just a ridiculous framing. Now you're against oligarchy, not before. I guess there wasn't an oligarchy before. This tour against oligarchy, where fucking Sanders and AOC tell us all about the brave American imperialist veterans and how Trump is hurting them. They supported cuts to veterans' care. Oh, why doesn't Hassan Piker ask them whether what the veterans did is actually worthy of praise and special benefits? Is it because he's he's strategically wrong to appeal to a broader audience. Well, if you're strategically wrong to appeal to a broader audience, and all that you're doing is affirming what the audience already believes, which is their wrong beliefs, you're not pulling them further left. If anything, you're fooling people into believing that you're further left than you are, resulting in them becoming functionaries for the Democratic Party. You're allowing the Democratic Party to leech off whatever small radical energy there might be off you and funneling those people into their party, right into them. Like, it's so naive. It's so childish to imagine that you're the one who is out strategizing the Democratic Party, that you're the one who is taking advantage of this opportunity to pull their supporters further left, when the entire reason that they're there with you is because they know in reality, they're the ones with the power, they're the ones with the resources, they're the ones with the strategy, and they are actually pulling your supporters right where they want them, not the other way around. You're not going to beat them at that game. They want to lull your supporters into complacency, into perceiving Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as doing what is needed within the party already, as you having a voice within the party, and thus no more action is necessary. Nothing independent is necessary. Working outside the party isn't necessary. You are a Twitch streamer. You aren't going to beat the most well-funded, cynical, and experienced imperialists in history at this sort of thing. All that you're doing is de-radicalizing your audience. You're not bringing any more people into being radicalized. And it doesn't matter how many of you are going to leave a comment on this saying, oh, but Hassan introduced me to your content or whatever. I mean, okay, how many? Maybe, let's say 5,000 of you. Maybe even 10,000. Well, here's what, like 500,000 regular viewers, perhaps? Maybe more? You're a drop in the bucket. How many more did he introduce to the mainstream Democratic Party? I guarantee you it's a lot more than he introduced to me or any other further left creators. It's not a pipeline. It's a dead end. And obviously by saying this, he's never going to watch my shit ever again. But it needs to be said. It's not even really a dead end. Because getting funneled into the Democratic Party is not a dead end. It opens you up for even worse things. When a supposedly radical voice is constantly allowed proximity to power, given platforms in the mainstream, it's because they see them as useful to their goals. It's that simple. Same with Chomsky, same with Zizek, same with anyone else. If Hassan really is just a naive child who doesn't get this is happening to him, which to be clear, I don't see how that's the case. Like, he's deriving so much benefit from this sort of thing, there's no way he doesn't realize it. Then he should think about that. Why are they materially giving me these profiles? Why are these Democratic Party members giving me these interviews that they would not give to someone who is as radical as I claim to be in reality if I really was that radical? You need to ask these questions. And that's me giving him the good grace of believing that he really doesn't have an ulterior motive and he really is just that naive. Why are you dividing the left? Because I don't fucking believe in the same thing that these people do and they're wrong. They're wrong. Why are you dividing the left? Isn't there more important things to be doing right now than attacking the left? When they say that, what they mean is it makes me uncomfortable because I consume your content, I also consume this other guy's content, and all that I care about is who makes the content and who's saying it rather than what they're saying. All the fucking comments. Like, how dare you say this? Rather than any sort of analysis of what I'm actually saying. Because ultimately what I'm saying is correct. And it breaks the illusion that someone like Hassan is to most of his audience something more than an entertainer. Than a politically themed entertainer. A guy who you can sit there and watch the news with while fundamentally learning very little. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. The wrong part is that he's led so many people to believe that it's something else. And you really see that when you criticize him from the left in ways that are very obviously true and undeniable as well. Because half the comments are nothing but, why are you dividing the left? Why are you attacking Hassan at this moment? How could you do this? I'm responding to him because he's wrong. And I will respond to anyone who's wrong on anything whenever I want, regardless of who they are, regardless of how uncomfortable it makes you. The very fact that Americans do nothing is in large part because of this. Even now that Americans literally have a guy who is dismantling all of whatever little state assistance there is to them, dismantling like the education department, dismantling Social Security, dismantling fucking everything. And they still do nothing. They do fucking nothing. And a big part of that is because their energy is funneled into the Democratic Party via Trojan horses like AOC, like Bernie Sanders. And then they do nothing because of that. And Hassan Piker actively encourages that. And I'm not even getting into Gaza talking about this, because if they do nothing about someone who so directly hurts them, then they're definitely not going to do anything for people whose existence they could freely ignore and things would be the same for them. So this sort of thing directly results in a lack of action. It directly results in inaction. And Hassan is contributing to that by like working alongside these people and giving them softball interviews. It would be like literally, he would have a better effect just not talking to them. It would be more powerful for him to say, so they contacted me to speak to them and I decided not to, than it would for him to actually speak to them. That is a fact. Now, give me all your money so that we can fight the oligarchy. Whatever the fuck that means. No one's fighting in the USA. They're all just sitting back and taking it. Trump's taking everything from you and you're doing nothing. You're the most cucked people in the world. At least the Europeans fight for themselves. They might not fight for Gaza, but at least they fight for themselves. You fuckers don't even do that. Fucking rebels, they call themselves. You just sit down and take it. Bend over for them. That's all you do. The least rebellious people in the world.